I mean, we had a homeowner literally yesterday that was scheduled to go to foreclosure April 1st, and we were able to, provide them some proven methods that we've seen to stop their foreclosure literally less than 24 hours before they were scheduled to go to sale.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Canyon Entrepreneurial Podcast. It's been a while. I'm happy to be back. Today I have a really important, special, amazing, influential guest with me today. I met him a couple months back in Orlando, Florida at a real estate conference. He's been someone who's been a guide for me personally, who's helped out a lot of people in his community, outside his community. Everywhere he touches, he tries to make leave an impact on people to better them and help them kind of pass that mentality on to others. So not only is he a helpful tool or resource for people, he kind of instills that philosophy on other people too. His name is Tasheen Collins. He's a great guy. Introduce yourself, say hi to the people.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Well, first, I want to say, Jonathan, thank you for having me on the podcast. It's definitely an honor. I've been working with you for quite some time, since we met, and it's just been a great connection. Super duper smart, super duper, savvy when it comes to the software stuff and all the kind of stuff that, isn't in my bandwidth. And that's what I love about networking is, you get to meet amazing people and meet the individuals that are, got the strengths that you don't got and get to lean on each other. So I definitely love that, and I appreciate you for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome anytime, man. Um, yeah, and I think we're kind of really sliding into like a real estate focused mentality of this podcast. That's what I've been taking a lot of passion in. I really love software. I love real estate. I love business. I love entrepreneurial efforts in general. And I've really started thinking about how, you know, building a business and building like that lifetime long wealth and real estate has really put an influence on my life. So that, it's a great person to have on Tasheen because he knows so much about real estate investing. He's really built it up from scratch. And I mean, I'm gonna let him say it himself. Um, so yeah, let's get this started. My first question for you, man, just kind of rolling in a little bit slower, casually, stretch it out a little bit. Just tell us about your background. Who are you? Where you're from? What brought you from where you were into who you are today?
Well, a little bit about me. I'm from Buffalo, New York. If you know anything about Buffalo, New York, super duper cold. We're known for the snow. Pretty close to the Canadian border as well, and right there near Niagara Falls, just to give some
Hmm.
geographical, references. Born and raised in the Buffalo area for about the first 20 years of my life. Then I started doing some traveling and, lived a couple other places, lived down south, moved around a little bit. Now I am a single father of two amazing boys
Hmm.
and a entrepreneur and real estate investor, and currently my own boss and aspiring to be very, very wealthy, and getting to that wealth, being able to replicate that through helping other people become very, very wealthy as well, on the path to building 100 millionaires that will build 100 millionaires.
Awesome. Love that phrase. Um, so what was like before getting into real estate? What was your job? What was your education background? And obviously we could get to like how did your interest change into being real estate? Because I know a lot of people they're thinking, hey, I want to get into real estate, but like me a couple years ago, I was a software guy, the farthest thing from, properties. Some people, maybe working, kind of like a part-time job and like I can't have the money for this, I can't afford that. It's like where did you start? What was your kind of bread and butter? And then what was that interest, how did that interest change into real estate to kind of relate with more people who may be interested in getting into it but don't see the connection between where they are and where they want to go.
So what I'll say is I've always been interested in property itself, not necessarily real estate, but just property. I took it back from feudalistic society when, if
Mm,
you owned land and homes, you mattered, and if you didn't own land and homes, you didn't matter. Hence the terminology landlord, where that came from, right?
mm,
So I feel like we are still living in kind of what I would consider almost like a modern feudalistic society. If you own assets, your voice and your uh, opinion gets more valued than the individuals who don't own assets. Not to say that it should be that way or that, that's correct, but we all know that's just how it is in today's society.
mm,
Um, so I think that's what got me to the point where it was like, okay, well, I know I have to figure out something because I made that correlation between mattering because you own things and you have economic power and you can, help to shape decisions versus not owning anything and not mattering or not that they don't matter, but they're not able to be as influential in the
mm,
decision making process of their own destiny. So that's what always had me interested. However, what I would say is what got me started, believe it or not, which has gotten many entrepreneurs started, is the COVID-19 virus
yep.
and the pandemic. I feel like that's been a big contributing factor to this mass exodus of entrepreneurship and almost like a renaissance rebirth
Mm,
within America. But what I will say is that the caveat behind it was that during COVID, I actually was working a W-2 job for National Grid, one of the largest electric companies in America, and making $13 an hour working from home. COVID hit, I ended up getting let go from that job and hired as a independent contractor for COVID-19 contact tracing and went from making $13 an hour to $27 an hour over pretty much overnight. Um, and then ended up with a raise to $45 an hour while working for the health department. They gave us a raise, and then 2 days later said that the company couldn't afford to pay all of the employees 4,500 or $45 an hour based on funding, and decreased our pay from $45 an hour to $35 an hour. At that point, I realized that no matter how good of a job I had, I just went from making $13 an hour to $27 an hour to 30, from 27 to 45, and from 45 down to 35. So I realized at that point that no matter how much money I made, if I was working for somebody else, no matter how good the job was, that they were still signing my check. Having a
mm,
job just over broke means that any day they could decide not to sign my check and that I would be broke
yep.
based off of their actions. So at that point, I continued working until the contract ended. Once the contract ended, I was looking for more work in the workspace. And, in my brain, I had already been stamped at a minimum of $35 an hour. So I didn't want to work for anything less than that. And when I started looking for work without having a college degree, everybody wanted to hire me at about $15, $16 an hour, and I said I was not willing to make less money than, I was going to be decreasing my pay by more money than I was going to be making an hour, going from $35 an hour to $15 an hour. That would have been a $20 an hour pay cut.
Mm,
Um, so, it just didn't make sense for me. And then at that point, I decided to become a licensed life and health insurance agent. So, did that for a little bit, helped some clients with the life insurance side, found out about a whole bunch of things like the whole life and infinite banking concept and IUL concepts, and the way that the wealthy leverage life insurance to be able to, legally not have to pay taxes, be able to utilize their money while making compound interest, and just, keeping their money really in their control instead of in the IRS's control. Um, and From there, I just decided that, I had to pull the trigger. I had already been in a bunch of different real estate mentorships from 2020 all the way up until even now. I'm still in a couple different mentorships. But what I soon came to realize, which will happen with probably a lot of Americans, is you learn something or you see an ad, you get interested, you have interest in a subject, you go pay for a mentorship or a course, and you think that paying for the mentorship or the course is actually going to change your life, when in reality, you have to take action on the knowledge and
Hmm.
leverage the knowledge that you learn in order for the material to be able to change your life.
Awesome. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. But every word is gold. So starting back, you said, you had that thought process of like that feudalist mentality. Are you almost like a history buff? Was this something that just kind of came up from like researching just capitalism, like kind of how it came up? Where did that like thought process even come from?
I mean, I've always loved history. It was my favorite subject in school. So I love learning about history. I love learning about, the way different people think, the way that, if you break down history, the word really is his story. So it's always, and we all know, you ever got to a situation or had a discussion and played the game telephone, one person tells a scenario, it's never going to be told the exact same. So I've
Hmm.
always been interested in looking at different people's perspective on the same uh, situation. And I think history does that a lot for us. So I've just always been interested in history, and I loved that time in history or learning about that time in history. And though there were a lot of struggles, I think a lot of the um, core values of that type of society still exist today, just in a capitalistic format instead of a feudalistic format.
Yeah. And I think that kind of puts into reference like, you know, understanding. I feel like a lot of people are like fish in like in a small pond or in like some sort of a like you know like bowl,
Lives in a
right?
bucket.
But yeah, and people are kind of like flowing into something without knowing the boundaries that they're in. But like you recognize that, hey, the world works this way. There's like these lights, there's this filter, there's these weird like fake plants. Like we're all in this like orchestrated situation, and I could kind of swim around in a circle like everyone else, or I could recognize that and take advantage of it and kind of, make that work to my advantage where I feel like a lot of people kind of, like you were in a situation before, you had your 9 to 5, you let somebody sign your paycheck, and if the next week they say you're getting a pay cut, that's just the way it is. But you recognize that, like, my influence in this situation is limited to the way it is because I have no ownership. I have no authority over my own personal, time because I'm selling that time to someone else and they could value that time differently. And you've decided to pivot into kind of, making your time more valuable. Does that make sense? Does that sound about right?
100%. And, the one thing that I would add to that is I know just like myself, you know, first of all, it's not always peaches and cream, right? So I don't want anyone that's listening to this to think that I'm sitting here with tens of thousands of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's not the case. But I have time freedom. I decide when
Mhm.
and where I eat lunch. I decide when I'm making phone calls or when I'm working. I decide, am I going to be working in Buffalo, or do I want to be working in Florida, or do I want to be working on a cruise ship or sitting in Mexico, or the things that a 9 to 5 doesn't give me the ability to do if you're not remote working. And even when you're remote working, you're still restricted to a time frame of, you got to be at work from 9 to 5 Eastern Standard Time, but you may be in Belize, which isn't running on Eastern Standard Time. So there's things like that. But what I want everyone to realize that sees their job as security is if you're working a W-2 and you understand how to leverage your W-2 income to get you access to assets that will produce cash flow, then your W-2 can be a superpower. But also understand that the only reason you have a W-2 is because somebody else decided that they didn't want to let someone be responsible for signing their check, and they started a business, and now they're responsible for signing your check.
Yeah, that's that makes that's like a great way to put it. You know, a lot of people just think of their employer as just like some mythical being, you know, it just popped up 100 years ago, but it was someone's hard work, someone's determination, someone's, you know, decision to go against the mold and do something their own way. Yeah, that's a great frame of reference. So let's talk into it. Let's get into the real estate side of things. So let's say this listener has a W-2, they're working their job, they kind of got up to a good rate. Maybe they don't think they could kind of buy a house right off their current salary, but they've been saving up and they're listening to this podcast and they're hearing what you've been saying about how you weren't happy with your employment and now you have multiple properties right now. So how did you get from, you know, working your job to getting into insurance investing? How did you get to your first property? You know, how did you manage your money to make sure that, you know, even though you were making money, buying a house, you know, especially in New York State, you know, I'm in Florida, these aren't cheap markets. You know, even if you're doing well for yourself, getting from somewhere to a house is still a big difference. So tell us about your first property, your first couple properties, how you made that leap, what was going through your mind, how you planned it out, and let's hear it.
100%. So, as far as the properties go, right? One, I want to say there's multiple different ways to buy properties. To touch on if somebody's got a W-2, most people don't understand that if you have a W-2 that you've been working and you've been in that industry for 24 months, meaning you've been doing customer service for 24 months, you've been doing nursing for 24 months, even if you've switched employers but you stayed in that industry for 24 months. Most people don't understand that whatever their W-2 income is, the average person, let's say they make, $50,000 a year, the bank will allow you to borrow 6 times your W-2 income to qualify to purchase a home. So if you're making $50,000 a year, that means the bank will allow you to get up to a $300,000 mortgage. That's just on a single family. Now, if you're talking about, using some investment strategies like, a duplex, which is 2 units, a threeplex, which is 3 units, or a fourplex, you can take that same $300,000 qualification, but say each of those units will rent out for $1,000 a unit. You can live in one unit, rent out the other three, and get 75% of that income, which would be $3,000 a month or $36,000 a year, added to your W-2 income. So now instead of only having a $50,000 income a year, they would take, say you buy the 4 unit, they'll take that 36,000, add it to your income, that becomes 86,000 a year. And this is before you even bought the property. It basically saying if you were to buy the property, you'd make another $36,000 a year, putting your total at $86,000 a year. And now you're able to qualify for 6 times $86,000 instead of 6 times 50. So that's one way that you can leverage a W-2 to buy a house traditionally. And then you have the NACA program, which will cover closing cost and down payment for those that say they have no money. You have the FHA program that's 3.5% down plus, closing costs. So you're probably somewhere about 10%. Fannie and Freddie has a conventional mortgage. Fannie and Freddie is a mortgage lending product. They will do 5% down. Those are all traditional methods. Um, and then if you've got, a little bit of money, say you're more of a higher level W-2, maybe you work for TSA, maybe you're a pilot, maybe maybe you've got some money put away and you can afford 20% down, then you also have what's called a debt coverage service ratio, or a DSCR lender, which will allow you to be approved based on what the property actually produces, saying, hey, your mortgage would be, $1,000 a month, as long as you can show that the property can produce at least, I would recommend, $1,300 a month. You can show that the property would pay the mortgage and have some additional income. You can also qualify for what's called a DSCR loan. Those are all traditional methods. Non-traditional methods, or the way that I've bought my properties, would be called subject to. Subject to is when you're buying a property with a lien in place. For those that don't know what a lien is, it's like a debt. A lien is like when you get a mortgage, they put a lien against the house to show that they're owed money. Or when you know get closing assistance or down payment assistance, they'll put a lien against the property. So subject to, somebody went and got a mortgage. For instance, in my first case in New York, someone went and got a mortgage in, I want to say, like 2014 is when they went and got their mortgage. They refinanced in 2020. When they refinanced in 2020, they got a 3.1 interest rate on their mortgage, and the mortgage payment was somewhere around $600 a month. This homeowner was helping out a family member, and due to helping out a family member, they co-signed for a loan, and the family member never paid the loan, which caused them to have to go into bankruptcy. During the bankruptcy process, they were paying for their paying for the loan that they co-signed. However, they were not paying their mortgage. So when the bankruptcy ended, now their mortgage was behind and had, over 3 years of missed payments on the mortgage, which they couldn't afford, and they were facing foreclosure. So what we did, we identified that they were in foreclosure. We were able to get in contact with the homeowner, and we said, hey, instead of you getting foreclosed on, how about we come in and we catch up your mortgage payments? That's $30,000 and that they just got to catch up their mortgage payments. That avoids foreclosure for you. It'll, stop you from getting missed payments reported on your credit report. And on top of that, how about we give you $20,000 to move on to the next chapter of your life, and we will take over the responsibility of the property, maintaining the property, and we'll also take on the responsibility of making the monthly mortgage payments moving forward, so that when the mortgage payments are made, it will continue to report on your credit, and you'll start getting on-time payments reported, which will help you improve your credit from the negative reporting of the missed payments over the last 3 years. And the benefit for them, we save their credit, we save them from foreclosure, we give them peace of mind. They put some money in their pocket. They weren't just thrown out with all their stuff on the curb. And now it's not on their record that they've been foreclosed on, but in fact, it's showing on their mortgage, on their credit report for over the last 16 months that they've been making their mortgage payments on time, but they're not even the one making the payment. We're making the payment, and we also have ownership of the property through a deed to the property.
Yeah, awesome. That's a lot of detail right there. So let's talk a little bit in about that process you just described, the subject to kind of that finding that those those people who are in distress about to get foreclosed upon. So you're helping them out. At the end of the day, it's real estate, it's business, it's getting money, but you've also found a way to actually make a positive impact on people's lives. If that's right, confirm it for me. And also tell me how that, motivates you, how that impacts you as a person, as a business owner, as a community, as a pillar in your community. What does that mean for you to like actually find a way to do your job, do what you love, and actually benefit the people around you.
I mean, at the end of the day, I really love being able to say that we're finding somebody that's, in the midst of the eye of the storm, right? And pretty much being able to pick them up out of the eye of the storm and place them back on solid ground and give them the ability to make the decision. What I love is even in the properties that we bought, the homeowner always has the ability to say, no, I don't want to sell to you. I'd rather this option. So they're not being forced into doing anything. They're being given an option. You can either do nothing and allow the bank to, foreclose on you, take the property, destroy your credit, give you no money, come there with the sheriffs and remove all of your items from the property. And, now you have nothing, or you can make a decision to beat the banks at their own game and, get a smooth transition to the next chapter of your life. And at the end of the day, one of the things that I've learned is when you solve big problems for people, you're compensated in way more than just financial gains, right? You get friendships, you get connections, you get to meet people. I mean, I'm still working with a lot of the homeowners that I've helped from foreclosure, from, stockbrokers to, business owners to, there's a plethora of people that, go through these issues, and we all have rough patches. So to be able to help people, give them education, give them understanding, be able to help them continue to feed their families, also be able to, help to feed our families, and quite frankly, avoid the, corporate Americas being able to defeat who they see as the little guy is a super major win for us every time that we get a foreclosure stopped. I mean, we had a homeowner literally yesterday that was scheduled to go to foreclosure April 1st, and we were able to, provide them some proven methods that we've seen to stop their foreclosure literally less than 24 hours before they were scheduled to go to sale.
Wow, that's amazing, man. Well, that's really impactful. I'm not sure, how you must have felt, but personally, I would have been feeling really good about myself and for the person also, because like it's almost like you're rescuing them from a dire position, almost bringing them off the edge. Um, I think you mentioned a lot about like how important it is for you to have like that network, those people you interact with, kind of stay in your network, even though you've kind of contacted with them, once or twice before, kind of keeping them together, kind of their stockbrokers, those agents, kind of keeping them in the loop to kind of continue to facilitate deals with you. So kind of give us like a little bit of information, on one of these deals, how many different parties are involved? Obviously buyer, seller, but there's a lot more, and I think we both know. So give the people a little bit more insight about how many people are involved in some of these deals and how you could change, something that could just be a transactional interaction, like, hey, you're the agent, here's some numbers, here's some things, let's sign a couple of deals, we'll never talk to each other again. How do you get to being a transactional conversation to being a network? This guy and I, we had such a good time together where we align on a few things. I want this person to do well. I will help him in the future and he'll help me in the future. How do you go from just, talking to someone, getting something done and never speaking to them again to like building these connections?
I think one, it's more about being transparent, right? I let people know 100% from the beginning, whether it's a title company, an escrow agent, an investor. I let them know from the beginning. I'm not a transactional based person. I'm a relationship based person. I'm looking to work with people that I can do business with over and over again versus having to find new people to do business with on every single transaction, and people that I can, help achieve their ultimate goals. At the end of the day, everybody has something that they're looking to achieve, and my goal is to help you achieve your goals on the process and in the process of achieving my goal as well. well and making sure that there's mutual benefit. And when there's a win-win for everyone, it's people want to continue to win, so they want to continue to work with you.
Spot on. Makes perfect sense. So how would you say, what advice would you say to give to yourself back when you're first starting, like to build that network? Let's say someone's right out of college or they've been working their job in a completely unrelated field. What do they do to get that network going? It's a huge part for getting your business propelled and establishing those foundations for the future. But, who do I talk to?
I mean, I would say, whatever it is that you want to do, first of all, scream it from the top of the mountain. Let everybody know that this is your intention and this is what you're doing and this is what you have to offer. And then, even when you're new, get around the people that are in that industry. If you want to be in insurance, get around the people that are in insurance. If you want to be in the real estate space, get in the people that are in the real estate space. If you want to be in the software space, get in the software space. But dial it down to what do you want? Do you want to be in software and you want to make $100,000 a year, or do you want to be in software and you want to be making, 600 to $1 million a year? And then what people in that industry are actually making that kind of money, and surround yourself with the people that are doing what it is that you want to do. Because if they're already doing it, they're not going to tell you that what you're doing you shouldn't be doing, or discourage you like your friends and family members that are in the same position as you, to where somebody above you that's already done it and is successful is never going to tell you you're doing too much. They're going to encourage you to keep going, and based off of your consistency, they're generally going to help you propel your business as well, versus hanging around those people that have never done it. Don't take advice from them.
Yeah, and if I were to add my 2 cents, I think it's not because they have any animosity or negative opinions of you. They just want you to be safe. And I think they're trained with the mentality of, this is the way the world works, or this is the world I've lived in my entire life. I kind of expect a safe avenue for the people I love to go to the same route. But people like you, people like other business owners understand that even that mentality isn't safe and that you've educated yourself in a different way. And when people come in contact with you, you're happy to kind of motivate them to do that different, go that different route.
100%. And I'm on Instagram, Tasheen _on _humanity. We'll make sure it gets put in the description. Anybody can, always reach out to me on Instagram, reach out to me on Facebook. Tasheen Collins is my Facebook name. I'm always willing to work with people. And at the end of the day, just understand, the first time I did my first ever deal, I had $0 in the bank account, the day before. The next day I made 8 grand simply by connecting, a homeowner to somebody that wanted to buy a property, and the homeowner couldn't afford to pay to sell their property. So, money's out there. But I will say that money is the result of the value that we bring. It is not the motivation behind what we do. And once we realize that, the money will come as long as you're solving the problem and being consistent, just got to make it happen.
Yeah, that reminds me of someone I met recently at a community event. A lot of business owners who weren't just people who were driven to gather revenue, but to actually make an impact in the community. One woman said that, there's too much ambition in the world and not enough purpose. And that really reminded me of what she said. Everyone wants to make something big of themselves, but kind of directing that motivation to something that's helpful for themselves, but also helpful for the people around them is huge. You started to plug yourself already. Let's keep it going. Do you have any other businesses that you're working on that you want to shout out? I know you have a couple initiatives going on. Name drop yourself, your plugs, the things you're working on. Let's hear it, Tasheen.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, we're working on some affordable housing opportunities. We're working to bring foreclosure knowledge to, the community and help them to be able to navigate foreclosures with or without us. So we will be dropping a lot of free content and have an ebook that'll be coming out soon as well about different methods to stop foreclosures. And at the end of the day, man, we just want to put people back in power and understand that, saving isn't going to get us, to power. Working a W-2 isn't going to get us to power, and just investing isn't going to get us to power. But if we make the right investments with the right people and, we stay committed and we stay willing to, also save and make smart decisions and combine everything that we're doing together, then we'll be able to be successful. And I think the biggest, page for those who, may be struggling now is realizing that you got to be willing to allow people to do things for you and understand that most of the time it's going to be the strangers that are going to support you, not the
Hmm.
people that you already know. So be prepared for your help to come from strangers, and that means you got to have the right attitude to be able to receive help from a stranger.
Yep. I heard that opportunity is something that you make for yourself just by being open to it. You got to be an open door if you want something to come in. Awesome. Tasheen, thank you for joining this call. You've been, a great source of information, motivation, and power for the people. Before we go, just drop your Instagram or your Facebook one last time to let the people know where you are.
Yeah, you can reach me on Facebook at Tasheen Collins, or you can reach me on Instagram at Tasheen underscore humanity. Tasheen on humanity on Instagram. I look forward to connecting with anybody that's listened to the podcast.
Awesome. Thanks everyone for joining. Have a great day.
You do the same.